Are we live?
Yeah.
Hello. Good morning. Good evening. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to today's Mush Talk. Super excited to be here. Super thrilled to be a part of this one more time. Hi, Jashid.
Hey, Prithvi.
I mean, we meet all the time, but
Just gonna wait for a few more people to join in.
as usual.
Yeah.
Hi, Health Fever. Hello. Thanks everyone for joining in. Super excited to have everyone today. This is one of the lives that we have been really looking forward to, not now, but when we even conceived Nuvedo and when we had these ideas brewing, you have so many ideas, you have so many things to talk about, but when they actually come into fruition, that's when we see the whole circle come together. And so for today's live, the topic is starting your own mini mushroom farm at home. What does that really mean? And I think that's something that, before we get into things, I just wanted to set some context here about why really is it important. We've been talking about this for so long now. Growing your own food, having access to things that are right around you, reducing your carbon footprint. But what does it really mean to grow your own food? Now, while we're not endorsing that you have, everyone goes and grows their own food, we should be at least reducing a certain portion of our
load on the ecosystem.
Load on the ecosystem, as you could call it, but having at least some portion of it, whether it's like small greens or certain amount of vegetables or crops that are not very easy to find. Why is that? Because firstly, there's a decreased carbon footprint. What we like to call food miles, or what we say food miles. How long does that food really take to reach you?
Right. How many kilometers does it have? Leave miles, food kilometers maybe more apt for India. How long does it have to travel to get to you?
How many hands has it gone through for it to finally reach you on your plate? And
how many layers of plastic?
And while we keep hearing this farm to table, I think on a daily basis to be able to inculcate that and say that at least maybe not 100% of my food, but 30% of my food,
or even 5%,
like start 2%, start 5%, and see how that really transitions for you. And having access to fresh and nutritious food, because by the time that really reaches you, you know how many weather conditions it's been a part of, where it's been put, is it really as fresh as it claims to be, and also really getting more control over your food. Now,
we have no idea when the food comes to your plate how it was grown or how it even got there.
So and I think while we talk a lot about food being medicine to us, if we just use those terms loosely and not really have an understanding about what we're putting into it, how it's being grown, and what is the actual parameters that finally affect your biochemistry on a daily basis. You may say, I don't know, mushroom, say tomatoes or something that don't work with me, but is it really the tomato or is it really the way it was grown?
Correct.
And I think I just suddenly remember this is something that I would like to share, and I know this is something that I don't know, I just remembered, but I think you might know where this might be going.
I can
But for a very long time, I genuinely thought that I had an allergy to mushrooms, and I'm coming out here.
Funny story.
Yeah, and crazy enough, being someone who started a mushroom company, I really thought I was allergic to button mushrooms, and then sooner or later down the line, when I started actually, growing my own, cultivating them, having understood the processes, I realized that I was not allergic to the mushroom, but I was allergic to the things that they put in it.
Correct.
And that's crazy because it was the process rather than the actual ingredient that was being used. Anyway, this is a sideline. But
and another line to this is that the difference between plants and mushrooms is that if you spray a chemical on a plant or a vegetable, you can wash it off.
Right.
But mushrooms are not like that. If they come in contact with any chemical, they absorb it. So there's a certain level of biological magnification that happens in mushrooms that if there is any chemical present in the substrate or the air or the water that's being used, it will be inside the mushroom and you cannot even wash it off.
You cannot even wash it off. And
so how you grow your mushrooms is actually
really,
very
critical.
important.
And I think it's really important to know, I think now to segue into like saying, growing your own mushrooms. Why? Time and again, we've spoken about this. It is not just recycling, but it's upcycling agricultural waste. Not just agricultural, lignocellulosic waste. So anything with lignin and cellulose can be upcycled. Mushrooms use very little water, and again we've mentioned this time and again how they have the ability to just work just using atmospheric moisture, and they are a very high quality source of nutrition. And again, we might be advocates for mushrooms, but even on a factual level, they are very, very rich in a diverse, complex, amalgamation
of minerals and all the nutritional
and it's hard
compounds.
To pinpoint really one thing that they could really be good at.
And they're even amazing prebiotic foods.
Yeah. And of course, low space utilization as well as sunlight. So all these factors involved, I think that really sets the context of what it is to mean to grow your own food and to set up your own mini mushroom farm. And
one really important point here is that probably will be overlooked is this is the cheapest way that you can do this. Mushrooms are not very cheap and they're not very easy to find. So this actually makes the whole process super cheap. You can literally grow this from things that in your house that you throw away, and also it's increasing your access to a lot of different types of mushrooms that you might not find in your supermarket or in your locality.
So today's talk, we're going to address a lot of these points, and for all of you who keep saying I have west-facing balconies and
I don't have sunlight. There's no space in my house to grow plants.
No more excuses here. No more excuses. So I'm going to play advocate for all the viewers and all of those mushheads who have tuned in.
So let's see, for all the people who just tuned in, today we're going to talk about how we can start a mini mushroom farm at home. So this whole talk is going to be about how you can start growing mushrooms at home and the easiest way to do it, just setting some context.
Yeah. So I'm just checking into who all have joined in. Michael God says, but oyster mushroom has potential to digest all kinds of hydrocarbon and it doesn't affect the ones who are eating.
I wouldn't say that sentence is completely true because, like I said, mushrooms have the ability to digest or break down a lot of hydrocarbon chains, like you rightly said, Michael God. But it can bioaccumulate things like lead and heavy metals, which is also why they use mushroom mycelium in bioremediation, because it is so good at absorbing all these heavy metals from soil or contaminated land. But that's not what you are looking for when you're growing your own food.
Mushroom. Yeah, exactly. Growing your own food. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play advocate for all of you all out there and, start from scratch, really get into the questions of like what it really takes, and oh my god, it's really hot today. So anyway, that's a side note. And we'll get into it, in a structured format. So I'm going to start by, really addressing the more basic questions, and let's see if,
start simple and then just work on whatever.
Yeah, so I'll try and then you can answer them and see if they work.
Sure, we can do that.
So I want to grow my own mushrooms. Where do I start? Like, I guess if you had to ask that really generically, where does one start? Yeah.
So you start with the mushrooms. So if you really want to start growing mushrooms at home, the first question that you should be asking yourself is, what's the climate like where I am right now? Is it truly suitable to cultivate all types of fungi? Because you might have the best genetics in the world, the substrate might be really good or the growing medium might be really good, but if your external environment doesn't support the growth of mushrooms naturally, you're going to end up spending a lot of money on just keeping your house hot or cold or wherever it is to simulate the environment required for the mushrooms to grow. Right. So the starting point for you to understand, to know or get into mushroom cultivation is looking at where you are right now and figuring out what mushrooms can grow in your locality in the weather conditions without you having to spend too much time or energy or money into trying to recreate that environment.
So how does one go about choosing the mushroom? Is that the same?
Okay. So let's say that you have you have your environmental conditions fixed. You know that you have 23-24 degrees and you can grow XYZ mushrooms. So you have a list of possible mushrooms that you can grow in that climate. So you're asking me, what do you do after that?
That's one, and also you need to know that you have certain ingredients available.
That's what I'm saying. So you have a list of mushrooms that can possibly grow in your area, and now you want to know out of those which is going to work for you.
Right.
So that boils down to mushroom food. So you have the right environment, but now you have to feed the mushrooms the right kind of food, or what we call substrate. So the second most important question that you have to ask yourself is, what is the most easiest substrate I can find around me? And this can vary from location to location, because if you are in the city, you might not be able to find any straw, or maybe you can find sawdust, but straw is not something that you can find very easily. And if you are living a little on the outskirts or in an area where there is an abundance of paddy or wheat, you can actually use wheat straw or paddy straw.
Right.
Suppose you are in the middle of the city and you have absolutely no access to anything, you can literally grow mushrooms on cardboard and coffee. So the starting point is finding out what mushrooms grow in your locality. Then in that list, trying to find out what are those mushrooms that can grow in the material that is most easily available.
Right.
So it should be cheap and it should be very easy to find, and this is going to be one of the most, the bulk of growing a mushrooms is basically choosing a substrate.
So, okay, once you've chosen that, say you have the perfect weather conditions, I have the substrate, then what?
So you're basically asking me what's a good mushroom to start with for a beginner. Is that the question, if I rephrase it?
No, I mean, say I know all of that, but like there are so many factors involved. Yes,
right.
like I have no idea what to do.
Got it.
How would I go about choosing
So this again, like there are a couple of other points to this. Is not just choosing the mushroom and the substrate, but also going into more important operational aspects of this cultivation, like how much mushrooms do I need? Am I growing for myself or for my family? Do I need mushrooms every month, or can I wait a couple of months between each harvest? Because mushrooms also take different times to grow and they have different yields. So from the same substrate, you might have two different mushrooms which give you two different yields. And one might give you a yield in 3 weeks and the other one might take like 3 to 4 months to grow. So the questions that you need to ask yourself are, how many mushrooms do you want to grow? Like how many mushrooms do you want at the end of each cycle? How much money do you want to invest? Because what happens is, if you want to grow mushrooms like shiitake or lion's mane or turkey tail or cordyceps or all the really fancy ones that you've been reading about online, it's not easy because you need to make a lot of investment into equipment like autoclaves or at least a still air box or a laminar airflow. I'm sorry if I'm scaring you with all these terms.
So 1 second, let's pause. So maybe I want to ask you, okay, I'm a beginner and I have no answers to these questions and I don't want to get into it. What do I start with? Like what's the most...
What's the easiest mushroom that you can grow at
no
home?
frills, easy, something that at least would make me a little more comfortable with that.
Got it. So this is a really interesting question, because a lot of the times what I find is we meet a lot of people during our events, and many times what we find is there are people who are really into cultivation but they fail because they chose the wrong mushroom to start with. So you have to start with something that's very easy to grow and something that you cannot like make a mistake with. And my go-to mushroom for a beginner to start cultivation is actually oyster.
Okay.
So you can start with pink oyster or a grey oyster or anything in the pleurotus genus that you can use.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few reasons for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you 4-5 reasons as to why.
Let's just pause once.
Sure.
And we'll take a question. Just that Pooja Vishwanath says, do mushrooms grow from seeds or spores? Maybe you can help us.
Sure. So mushrooms are not plants. They actually grow from spores. But there's a small plot twist to this. When you're cultivating mushrooms at home, most commercial cultivators don't start with spores. They start with mycelium. And there's a reason for this. So the analogy that I like to use here is basically using apple seeds to grow apples. So if you buy an apple at the supermarket and you want to grow the apple from the seed that you might find inside it, is that something that can work? Actually, it doesn't work like that, because you cultivate apples through something called vegetative propagation, through grafting. And why does one need to graft? When you grow from seed, it's a genetic reset. So it's a 1 in 10,000 chance that your final apple might look like what you got from the supermarket. And you don't want that. As a commercial cultivator, you want to know that every time you start to grow something, you can get XYZ yield, and you know the growth parameters, and you know what mushrooms are going to come out of your packet. So as a cultivator, you're essentially working with mycelium and you're vegetatively propagating mycelium. So even though mushrooms do grow from spores, as a cultivator we work with mycelium, and we work with mycelium on grain. That's called spawn or mushroom seed. Mushroom seed is actually the wrong terminology for this. So grain spawn is the right word, and grain spawn is nothing but mycelium growing on grain, and that's what you use as seeds to propagate the mycelium.
Awesome.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. So getting back to the mini mushroom farm, and I think while we understood that, I guess oysters are really the ones to start with, why would you say that it would be the best, and how does that go about? I mean, how do we go about?
There's many reasons to why oyster is the best mushroom. So let's start with something like time. As a beginner, you're probably like very anxious about, okay, is this happening? Did I make a mistake? What's going on? So oyster mushrooms are one of the fastest growing mushrooms out there, and you can get your first yield in like less than 45 days. From start to finish, in 6 weeks, you'll have your first harvest ready.
Nice.
So it's a super aggressive mushroom. It grows really fast. The first reason is that it grows really fast. The second reason is that it gives a really good yield. So oyster mushrooms are one of those mushrooms which have the ability to transform all the lignin and cellulose that they're growing on into useful matter. Yeah, like food.
Right.
So they have a really high yield. So for every gram of substrate that you put in, oyster mushrooms can probably give you the best bang for the buck. It can give you the most yield for a same substrate.
Got it.
So second reason is yield. Third reason is they're extremely aggressive, and you can inoculate them like in open air. Like you can add the spawn to them to the substrate pretty much under like semi-dirty, semi-clean conditions, because the mycelium itself is super aggressive, and even if there is contamination inside the substrate, it has the ability to fight it off. But again, oyster mushroom has its limits, so you can't just really take advantage of this. So aggressive mushroom, chances of it going wrong are really low. And last, one of my interesting points is that oyster mushrooms are not very finicky when it comes to food. They can eat anything. You can start with straw, you can do sawdust, you can do cardboard, you can do coffee, you can even do jeans. So we have tried growing oyster mushrooms on jeans and organic cotton.
We actually have a video on that, guys. Do go check it out. We've got like a bunch of different substrates we used, and I think it was really wacky substrates, including jeans, like Jashid said. You should check that out. Yeah. So a lot of experimentation that you can do with oyster. I think.
So there's a funny joke that I found in one of the online forums that I was on. It's basically the guy saying that if you hold down your family cat long enough, if you can hold your cat down long enough, I'm sure the oyster mushroom can eat that also.
Okay.
So they're not really choosy when it comes to the food that you give them, and you can work with a wide range of substrates.
Right.
And last but not least, oyster mushrooms are one of those very few mushrooms which you can grow using cold pasteurization. So cold pasteurization is one of the easiest ways to clean your substrate while before cultivating mushrooms.
Okay, hold on. So before that, let's just get into what exactly is pasteurization. I mean, what is I know.
I think most of you must have heard it with respect to milk. So it's similar to that process. Basically, pasteurization refers to the process where you boil or you bring up the temperature of your substrate between 80 and 100 degrees and hold it for 2 to 3 hours. So basically boiling your substrate, your straw or sawdust or whatever, for 2 to 3 hours and maintaining the temperature of 80 to 100 degrees. So what happens when you do this is all the pathogens or all the unwanted microorganisms that you want inside the substrate, they die. So you are essentially cleaning the substrate by boiling the straw. And it has to be boiled between 80 to 100 degrees, and that's what pasteurization is. Pasteurization is essentially a method to clean your substrate, basically.
Got it. And okay, pasteurization means
Cleaning a substrate.
But
so what is cold pasteurization?
yeah, and why cold, and why, what is so novel about it?
Okay,
what is this
fine. So cold pasteurization, essentially in cold pasteurization what we do is we take the substrate, we soak it in water, and we add a couple of teaspoons or we add some amount of this chemical called hydrated lime. Hydrated lime is calcium hydroxide, and once you add it to the water, what it does is it basically just increases the pH of the water. So this is one of those chemicals that they use in agriculture to increase the pH of the soil.
Right.
And it's completely organic. So
nice one.
just adding this powder to the water, mixing it thoroughly and soaking the straw or the substrate inside that overnight. What this does is it increases the pH of the substrate. So lime, hydrated lime, it's not lime from lime juice. Hydrated lime is extremely basic. It's a high pH chemical. So once you add the hydrated lime into the water, the pH of the straw increases, and what happens is at that high of a pH, no other life can sustain. And this is where oyster mushrooms come in. They're so aggressive that they're one of the few things that can really take over the substrate. Yeah.
So, but like, would you say that this method is more like efficient, economical? Why would one choose this? Because say I have like, I have a large container and for gas. Why can't I just boil it or clean it up that way?
So two things. First thing is you have a large container and gas, right? So you need a large container and you also need gas to heat up water.
Yeah.
Now second question is, do I have a stove or a vessel large enough to accommodate so much straw? Because straw is very light. 1 kilogram of straw is a lot. So if you're going to be cultivating mushrooms at home for your family, I don't think that you'll find a container. You might have to buy a metal container big enough for you to heat your water for this. And apart from that, just from a cost perspective, if you look at a cost-benefit analysis, to boil straw for 2 to 3 hours at 80 to 100 degrees, you're going to spend at least 25-30 rupees worth of gas. Gas is not cheap, guys. And on the other hand, I can speak for our product. So we have a product called Nuvedo, which is basically the same hydrated lime that we use for pasteurizing. Nuvedo, one packet of Nuvedo costs 100 rupees and you can pasteurize close to 16 kgs of straw with that, which brings the cost around 6 rupees per kg. 6 and 30. So lime pasteurization is essentially 1/5 the cost of
the
whole boiling or pasteurizing the substrate. So it's a really cheap way. You don't need to invest in any equipment. You don't need to boil anything. You just have a bucket in your house, which I'm sure most people have, and just soak your substrate inside and pull it out the next day and use it as is.
Okay, this is, obviously a lot more convenient and economical. Not to be suggestive, but also to say that if you really look at the ways in which people have been doing it, or like there have been ways in which mushroom cultivation DIY style has really evolved. This is less messy, I guess. You also have just a container, and you're not having to deal with multiple different variables in that whole process.
Imagine the kind of mess that you would be making in your kitchen dealing with all that water and straw.
That would just be crazy.
Yeah, so this is way more convenient even from a space point of view.
And what would you see are the different varieties of oyster one could grow during this process, using this process?
So in our experience, we've tried like 5-6 different varieties of oyster and all of them grow pretty well. And just to list a few, elm oyster, Florida oyster, pink Florida white oyster, pink oyster, golden oyster, even tuber oyster, many of the old varieties, even Sajur Kaju. So we have had bunch of different types of oysters that we have grown and all of them have given us successful results. So I think it's safe to give a general statement that all pleurotus or like all oyster mushrooms can be grown using lime pasteurization.
Awesome. So would you say that there are any other advantages to this, or apart from this?
So one interesting thing that we found.
Just before that, I think we'll just take a question. Arup Nanjapa says, curious to know if you have tried growing some of the native edible mushrooms. It is easy to grow them from spore prints, or is there any other method? They deteriorate in a few hours once they're harvested.
Right.
Also native to, would you say, which part of Karnataka? Just curious to know that, but yeah, we'll answer.
I think I have to break down the question into what are the native mushrooms and have you tried growing them and can you grow them from spore? So there's a problem. So I'll do the last part first because it's easy to address. Growing from spore is going like 2 to 3 steps back in the process. So what cultivators do, or what spawn companies or other companies do is basically they spend their time trying to isolate the best genetics that give you consistent results. And they do this from spore. So they start from spore, they make cultures of it, they grow out the mushrooms, they choose the mushrooms from the spore which gives the best result and continue to propagate those vegetatively.
Right.
So going to spore is essentially putting you 3 steps back in the process, and that's not advisable. But to grow a wild specimen, it's either tissue culture or spore. That's the way out.
Right.
So spore is a genetic reset, and I wouldn't recommend growing from spore unless you're doing a research or trying to grow some novel mushroom. And the second question is, can we cultivate native species of mushrooms? It's too generic and too broad a question because there's thousands of species of mushrooms out there.
Yeah.
And many of the mushrooms like Termitomyces that we find at our native place or in the villages, you can't cultivate them because the relationship that they have with the environment is very difficult for us to emulate, and we're just starting to figure out how they actually grow.
Right.
So short answer is, it's not easy to grow wild mushrooms. It takes a lot of time to figure out their behavior.
But it's super interesting and we'd love to explore that. So if you have something in mind, let's connect on that. So coming back, just to understand, you were talking about the advantages. What would you say are the advantages and how do we look at that?
So cost is one. Cost and convenience are the first thing. Right? It's cheaper, it's way more convenient. And the second thing is what we found interesting is that lime pasteurization essentially increases your yield by a good 20%. Yeah. So if we compare different methods of sterilization and pasteurization, we found that lime pasteurization essentially increases the yield as well. And this could be because of the extra nutrients that's there inside the in the water. Again, there's not enough research to prove this, but our speculation is that it could be because of all the extra nutrients which are there inside the water.
Right. So I mean, now I think we've deconstructed like at least what it takes to begin that journey, and if that, I mean, that hasn't been simple. We hope. I mean, at least we've tried to like make it as simple as possible. And if you still think that was like difficult to do, or like we've made it even easier for you in terms of creating a product that is accessible and easy for people to start at home. Which is right here, our DIY mushroom growing kit. It's even the straw has been cut for you in that.
Yeah, now you have no excuses not to grow mushrooms because this bucket essentially has everything that you need to grow your mushrooms.
In fact, it's one of our babies in terms of what we really wanted to get to people. I know we work with the kit and things like that, but this has been, I think, it's more in line with our ethos and where we want to be sustainably.
And we want to give the power to you guys.
Yeah, to really go. And I won't get into what all is inside, but we've got like a bunch of things. There's like
we'll just talk about a couple of things that's inside, right? So this bucket essentially contains everything that you need to grow mushrooms at home. So let's start with the most basic thing. It has spawn. Okay, it comes with a packet of spawn. You get to choose your own spawn also on our website. The next thing is Nuvedo, which is the mushroom pasteurization powder, the lime powder. Then the micropore tape, and last but not least,
we've even got like a whole manual with a lot of information.
Yeah, so it has all the steps that you need to grow your mushrooms, and apart from this, there's even a 40-minute YouTube video that we've done where each and every step is explained in detail. And like Prithvi said, if this isn't enough for you, we even have like chopped straw for you. So you literally just have to put all of this stuff inside a bucket and just mix in the lime and you're good to go. So there's no excuse now for you not to grow mushrooms at home.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, excited to share this with y'all, and we're even going to be doing a free webinar for people who would like to get into that more deeply. And the crazy thing about this whole process is that we're really trying to ensure more people get into it and start to utilize mushrooms so much more easily. There shouldn't be much resistance to it. We've got a few questions. Sorry about that. So we've got a few questions. So Sharat says, problem with hydrated lime is the safe disposal of the water. A lot of big farms dispose of the water in nearby fields that thus causes the pH of the soil to become basic and harms the microbiome. 100%.
I agree, 100%.
100% agree.
So one way that you can counter this is by mixing an acid like acetic acid or vinegar, which is very cheap, into the water to neutralize the solution before you dump it into the land. And also from all our research that we have done online, if we dilute the water, it can actually be beneficial for the soil to increase the pH, because many times what happens is soil with repeated use of fertilizers and manure and other pesticides, it becomes extremely acidic. So if you dilute this water and you use it for your fields, it's okay, and even better is just neutralizing it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sharat.
Yeah, very, very valid point.
Really good point, and really important to know how you should be disposing that off. Arup Nanjapa says that the mushrooms emerge post-monsoon in a short window. With pollution, it's becoming even rarer.
Definitely.
100% agree. And that is why also there's a strong need for us to conserve some of these mushrooms. Go into like practices, even if you know in your certain area that there are some mushrooms growing and you haven't seen them in a few years, it is important as like, citizen scientists to really document it, have that kind of, those pictures to have, at least we may not be able to know exactly what it is, but at least we'll have some idea of.
And what mushrooms grow in the environment also probably an indicator of how the environment is doing, the health of the environment also.
Yeah. So he also says that would you recommend using hydrogen peroxide to sterilize substrate and surfaces when cultivating mushrooms, or is it bad for the propagation of fungi?
So hydrogen peroxide is pretty commonly used to clean surfaces. They sometimes even use it inside the humidifiers to make sure that it doesn't get contaminated. And I think if it's used in the right quantities and if you adjust the percentages correctly, it is pretty safe to use to clean surfaces. About sterilizing, using it to clean pasteurized substrate, there are materials out there which recommend this, but I am not really well versed in this method. I haven't tried it myself, but yes, definitely there are people who have tried using hydrogen peroxide to clean substrates as well. But it is very commonly used in humidifiers and also as an agent to clean surfaces in mushroom cultivation. It's very effective.
Right. I think there's a question on Facebook by Alok. He says, what are your upcoming projects in this space? So I think you can take that.
So we have a lot of really interesting things that we are working on. One of the topics is basically warm varieties of mushrooms which can grow above 35 degrees, because we are witnessing one of the warmest summers that we have had in the last 5 years. So
yeah.
And we want to ensure that
we're sweating now. Like literally we've been sweating through this live. But yeah,
I think it's the first time in Bangalore. But essentially we're trying to find mushrooms which are suitable for growth in warmer areas. That's one topic that we are working on. Apart from that, this ongoing research is the last year that we are continuing in the space of functional mushrooms and mushroom extracts. So how to grow those mushrooms in a way that they have a high percentage of those active compounds that we are looking for.
Yeah.
Apart from that, how do you extract those compounds in a way that you can pull out as much as you can from the material without using too much energy or spending too much money. So we are working with a couple of government certified labs on these projects, and another couple of projects are there also in-house, and you'll all get to know this as and when things progress.
Yeah, so many things going on. So yeah, slowly. We have a question from VVN Funny. He says, can you recommend some high temperature varieties except milky?
So apart from milky, you can look at paddy straw. Paddy straw is also a warm variety. Then there's macrocybe. These are the two commonly cultivated mushrooms that are capable of growing about 35 degrees. Pink oyster mushrooms are also highly tolerant to heat, but they will not grow above 35 degrees. They can tolerate up to 31, 32. And at that temperature, you won't be getting pink mushrooms. They'll essentially come out looking white. And off the top of my head, I can probably even think of Pleurotus tuberegium, like king tuber oyster as another mushroom which grows about 35 degrees. Yeah. So, yeah, these are the mushrooms that I know of. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's about it in terms of the questions that we've had.
And everybody, please, whoever's attending today, we have very special news. So anyone from the Nuvedo circle, basically y'all who are listening today, if you buy the DIY kit this month, you get to attend a free webinar in which we'll be talking about mushroom cultivation in depth. It's going to be an hour-long webinar. It's going to be free for anybody who purchases the DIY kit, and it will be on the 26th of this month.
Yes.
So make a note of that, purchase your kit before that and attend the free webinar. We're going to go really deep into all the topics that I discussed today, and we'll have a lot more time and space to discuss the questions that you might have as well.
Right. And I think, just before we sign off, we just want to say that with each product that we come out with and every release that comes out, there is the thought of our core ethos, which is to really bring in sustainability and to have this system in which mushrooms become a common food ingredient to almost everybody. It is part of our vision. It is part of why we're here and why we do this every single day. So yeah, I think with every product that we have, there is a lot of thought that goes in. There's a lot of structure as to why we really do this. And we're really happy to have all of you here to support and take forward the mission. As we keep going, we get into more complexities and more types of varieties of mushrooms that we're going to be.
But the magic is always there, and it keeps unfolding as we explore this space together.
Explore it with us, stay with us. And
thank you so much for tuning in today.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
And we hope to see you on 26th.
Yes. Keep hydrated, keep going. Much love, everybody. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.